According to a recent Gallup survey, around 66% of workers feel disengaged from their job. From that exact same survey, about 33% of workers actually feel like they're doing work that they are really good at and that they enjoy every day, specifically doing what they do best, which is staggeringly low. And it makes you start thinking about your career. When you're early on in your career, and when I was early on in my career, all I really wanted was to get a job. I remember when I was about to get out of college, I was desperately applying to hundreds of jobs, like I'm sure many of you are. And it took 9 months for me to get a job. And honestly, my dad happened to just point at a job, and life is somewhat humorous. And the job he pointed at was the first job I got. But that was, again, after spending months putting out resumes. I had gotten one interview at the time from a friend, and it was my first technical interview. So like most people, I did not pass it. And so I just felt so hopeless. And so once I finally got a job, I was ecstatic. It was great. I had this view that things were now going to work. Fast forward a few years, and I think I was hit by what most people will be hit by. If you're just in college, you probably won't know what this is. If you are around 25, 26, you're going to know this feeling of realizing that this is the rest of your life, right? Like up until this point, everything in your life has been just set out for you, right? School, college, maybe some internships, and now here you are in life, and it's kind of like, okay, what do I do next? There is this empty canvas, and in a weird way, the fact that you have all these choices is stressful. And in some other ways, you're looking at your job and wondering, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? Like, do I find joy in being a data engineer? Do I want to be writing SQL queries for the next 40 years? And so you're kind of sitting with these questions, and I, at that time, had started reading lots of books. Also, I happened to have someone who opened the door to me, provided me an opportunity to start consulting, and that's what really kind of pushed me down that path. So today, what I want to talk about is building what some people call like a portfolio career. So building a career that you can be proud of, and actually building it beyond just taking jobs, but trying to think about it from a much larger lens. Because the thing is, again, if you're just now turning 25, 26, you're realizing that this is it, right? Or if you just got out of college and you've just done a few years, right? 3 to 5 years, you start being a little bit disillusioned and realize, okay, what is work? And how do I become part of the 33% of people that like doing what they're doing? With it, guys, I just want to take a quick pause to give a quick introduction to myself for those of you who are new to this channel. Hey, my name is Ben Rogoshon. I'm currently a data infrastructure and data strategy consultant who has his own independent consulting company. Before I did this about 3 years ago, I worked at Facebook, and before that, worked at a startup and a few other companies, all in the data world. I now mostly do consulting, but I am involved in several other projects. And so I wanted to share my perspective on how you can build a career that is the career you want and not just the career you kind of fall into. So in a lot of my videos, I talk a lot about the technical stuff. Look, you have a career and you need to build it in such a way that, one, it's financially beneficial for you, right? You want to be making money. We can't deny that. But two, you're happy with what you're doing. And that's why when people ask me questions like, what job should I pick? Data engineer versus data scientist, it's hard for me to answer because both of those roles make decent money. It really comes down to what do you want to do. So let's talk about how you can better design your whole career so you're not left, in the end in being 30, 40, 50, kind of looking back and maybe being a little bit disappointed in what you're doing. So let's start from the beginning, right? Like foundations of your career. When you're early in your career, I think everyone should, and I think benefits from, doing some level of, grind level mindset. It's a little bit cringy. It's when you're going to focus a lot on trying to pick up skills. Oftentimes, right, most of us have less responsibilities as we're younger, and it gets, you have more as you get older. So now is the time to really try to develop your technical skills, right? Like when I was first going at my first job, I was spending all of my time, whether it was at work or in my free time, just testing outside projects, building projects at work. I went through a C# phase where I was doing things with MVC.NET. I went through a Java deep phase when I was doing things with Spring Framework. Of course, some R. I was trying to test out everything and learn more about these technologies, while at the same time picking up books like Kimball's data modeling book and trying to build little side projects. Much of which, maybe I don't use that knowledge directly today, but it is there and it is useful as I'm working on other projects. So this is really a great time for you to just build that base because you don't want to be, 6 years into your career and having to constantly feel like you're playing catch up. If you have a solid technical base, all the new technologies that come your way are not going to be as hard to learn, right? You're going to be like, okay, I kind of already know like 30% of this tool, I can pick up the rest, or, 80% of this tool is just these other tools that I've worked on, right? Like dbt, it's like SQL, some Jinja, maybe you're hosting it in Docker. So if you've got those other tools, you kind of can put that all together and it's not that hard to work with. But if you're starting from a blank slate and don't have the basics down, it's going to be really hard for you to catch up quickly. On the flip side of like building this technical base, I remember one of the days when I was working, I was kind of excited. Like I kind of built this dumb little social media feed at my job. I was like, hey, look, on this website, we can now do comments and go back and forth, and you can and engage, and isn't this kind of cool? And I sent that to my direct manager at the time, or showed it to them, and they kind of looked at me and they were like, so? Is this what you spent your time on today? And they were kind of I think a little bit frustrated, but also showing me a good point, which is at the end of the day, you have to understand what the business wants and how to communicate. If you do have a good idea, why it's a good idea, right? You can't just be like, hey, here's something cool. Isn't this cool? Here's some number, some statistic I found out in our data, right? You need to already come with your plan and how you're going to communicate that plan to non-technical folks. So do spend some time, maybe that first year or two, just honing your technical skills. Mix in a little bit about business, think about your soft skills. Think about how you communicate with other people. Again, this is the phase of your career where you should just be building skills. A lot of people want to go start a startup. And yeah, if you've got a great idea, perfect, go do that. But honestly, learning from other people, learning from more experienced people is a great opportunity where you do not have to pay, or you do not have to take a huge risk on your career. So build your technical skills, build a baseline of business skills, read a few books about networking and sales. And one of the books I remember reading early on was The Personal MBA, and just trying to understand, what does the business actually care about. I also spent a lot of time trying to build relationships. Up until this point, I really was more of a secluded person. I had obviously friends in college, but after working, you kind of just get in this mode and you don't necessarily go out and talk to people as much. So I really spent some time trying to build relationships with people in the industry outside of my own job. I would reach out to people in my job to, ask to see what they were doing. Hey, do you go to events in the data world? Trying to learn more. That's how I went to eventually DAMA and DAML, which were two events in Seattle, or two groups in Seattle. And I slowly started sharing what I was doing, right? I started writing content as well. But all of this just kind of builds your base. While you're doing all that, the other thing that is really, I think, important to be considerate of is to be open to opportunities. Opportunities generally fall into two camps. Ones that just fall in your lap, right? Hey, you're lucky. Your friend's dad is the CEO of Facebook or something. I don't know. He's Mark. And on the other side, you have opportunities you create yourself. Now, in some way, these opportunities don't necessarily happen all the time, just magically, the ones you create. Sometimes you can push and try to create the opportunity. But if you're more passive, like me, you can create content, and that creates and brings opportunities to you. That's a lot of how I've done it. But the point is, when these opportunities come to you, is to be open to them. I know a lot of people, I always use the story of my brother for this, who sometimes say no when opportunities come and knock in front of you. For those who don't know, I worked in fine dining for a few years before I worked in tech. And in order to get a job at really nice restaurants and fine dining, you often have to do what is called a stage, which means to work for free. They refer to it in The Bear, if you've watched it, where one of the characters comes in and kind of works for free for a little bit. So you're the stage. I did that for 3 months and eventually got hired at this restaurant. And eventually that restaurant needed a busser. They're losing a busser. And I was like, hey, I have a brother. You can go use him. He's great. And when I brought it up to my brother, I remember having to fight him. I'd be like, I am giving you a job where, I had to work hard to prove myself. And I'm going to give you a job at a fine dining restaurant where you're going to get tipped in. He was making more than me per hour at the end of it. They worked shorter shifts, the front of the house, but making more than me per hour. But I had to literally it felt like pulling teeth. So when opportunities come knocking, you don't have to say yes to all of them, but make sure you kind of assess them, right? Take the chance to be hey, would this benefit me? Generally people like to say will I learn or will I earn from this, right? That's often the saying is is this an opportunity where I can learn from or I can earn from? Will it benefit me in some way, right? You want to be picking up skills, or especially early on, maybe pick up extra cash, because at the end of the day, you're trying to reduce risk in the future. So one way to do that is by having lots of skills and a big network. Another way is to have lots of cash. Obviously, best is to do all of them. The more you can kind of reduce risk by taking on opportunities, gaining skills, increasing your income, increasing your network size, that all reduces risk. And I've definitely had plenty of other opportunities. For example, the first time I was consulting, it just fell into my lap. I happened to be talking to the financial director at the company I worked at, who was a temp. He was more of a turnaround financial director. And he was like, hey, I often do these types of projects. I need someone to come in and help me with the data work. Can you come and do that if I ever need you? And I was like, sure. And somewhere down the line, 6 or 8 months later, he was like, hey, I have a project. Would you like to help? It wasn't anything sexy. It wasn't like data science. It was, hey, I just need to move data from Access to SQL Server and then make some queries off that. And that project kicked off my whole consulting career. So be open to these opportunities. And here's 3 points that I'd like to add. When these opportunities come, one, say yes strategically, right? Like you can't say yes to everything, but if it is in that category of you're going to learn, you're going to earn, or you're going to build your network, take it, right? Like if you have the time, if all you're going to do on your weekend anyways is watch some show or play some video games, take it. You can do that in the future. Trust me, it'll be there. 2, be proactive. Try to do things that get yourself out there. I would give talks for free. I would, put out content. Maybe you have a network. Keep those relationships alive. Really be caring about them. Be genuine. Try to put yourself in situations where if you hear friends say, hey, I need some help with something, just be like, hey, I can do this. I know I have these skills, or I can pick up these skills. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. And leverage momentum, right? Like once things are going, don't just be like, okay, I can rest. Especially, again, early on. There's no need. Like when things are clicking, it's a great time to keep going. I constantly would be like, hey, I wrote something, or I had a client and that client gave me ideas to write. And because I was writing, I got more clients. And because I got more clients, I was asked to speak. And because I was asked to speak, I got more clients. And like, you just kind of keep going with that momentum. But now let's actually talk about building your career portfolio. Because a lot of this has been like setting the stage, right? You want to build a baseline of skills. You want to make sure you have opportunities and projects that you say yes to that continue to build your abilities. You want to try to reduce risk by increasing your network size, increasing your cash reserve, so to speak, and increasing your skill bank, because that all in the future reduces risk. And then you actually want to start building your career, right? Like you've been doing this now for 6 years. Maybe you've just been kind of grinding, getting really good at whatever you want to get good at, taking on a few challenging opportunities. And now you can start looking at your portfolio and see like, okay, I have resources, right? Like I have a network, I have some cash, I have skills, maybe a few side projects that you can show off. How can I really use that in the future? And here's a few ways I'd like to think about it. One, you need to think about long-term and short-term bets. So some things you're going to be doing are short-term, they pay really well, but they don't have a great long-lasting impact. And one of those examples is consulting. So I talk a lot about consulting here, but consulting is an example of that. Generally, if you are a consultant, you do not have IP or anything that gives you this one-to-many ability where you can't sell anything and just copy paste it and make money based off that resource and that capital, essentially, that product that you've built, and make it grow, right? Like, hey, if I need to make 10 of these, it costs me a minimal amount of money or time. As a consultant, if you want to make 10 times more in dollars, you either have to 10 times your rate or the amount you're charging, or 10x the amount you're working, which eventually hits a cap. Like, at some point, you don't want to work that much anymore. And so there's nothing to sell. There's really nothing of value unless you create some sort of IP or thought leadership that just is so valuable that it shifts the way the whole data world or whatever world you're in operates. And so that's like the major downside. In fact, that was just talked about by Joe Reese, where he talked about, hey, consulting is great and all, but it really is this negative return eventually. So I think, again, it's a great short-term bet as maybe you're trying to think about, what should I do? Maybe you quit your job. You've now doubled or tripled your salary because you're consulting. And this is assuming you're also taking care of your expenses. So on top of that. But again, your goal should be to build this one-to-many situation, right? Somehow you need to amplify what you have and need to 10x it without having to 10x yourself. And there's a few ways you can do that, right? One thing you can do, and this works for me, is you can become more involved with startups, right? If you want to get some equity in companies you believe in. You might see that I'm an advisor in multiple companies on my LinkedIn. And part of that is me taking a little bit of a longer term bet, right? Being like, hey, I will bet on these companies that in the next few years, they will do really well. And I want those companies to do so well that, again, what my initial investment into them was put in actually is amplified, right? Like, it's not just like, okay, this initial investment, the value that I bring in is amplified by both sides. My network and reach, the product and its capabilities, and hopefully those come together and create lots of value in the future. You might decide to write a book. A book's another way that you can amplify your abilities, right? You write one book, it can now sell, 100 copies without you having to really work harder. You do need to have an interesting take, right? Or see a need for that book or for that product or for anything you're deciding that you're building long term. But all of these generally take some giving up of instant gratification, which consulting kind of in my world fits in that bucket. It's instant gratification. You get paid. You're a mercenary to a degree, versus taking this long-term view and being like, hey, I want to build a product that I think will do well. I don't know if it will, and I'm going to have to spend the next 6 months just building it before I can even sell it to people. There are ways to reduce that risk, but you have to take this opportunity to take 6 months before you can even hear about opinions, then another 6 months to maybe your first customer, then another 6 months till you're even close to closing that first customer, so on and so forth. And it takes time. But if you get that flywheel going, that is kind of the end goal, right? You can only make generally so much per hour. Even when you're doing like per project pricing or per value pricing, which I talk a lot about in my consulting group, it hits a cap. And sure, maybe you're eventually being on retainer and making $2 million a year working on 2 or 3 key projects for a company. But again, as soon as you stop working, that money stops and there's no machine or product or thing that you can sell that's really worth anything. So it's a good thing to think about. Like, don't just think about short term, think about what your long-term goals are. Now, let's think of why this matters. And the truth is, both the traditional 9-to-5 and consulting provide some level of stability, especially if you have consulting going really well and you just have clients coming in. It provides this consistency of income. But in most cases, true wealth is not created by your labor. It's generally generated by some level of capital, right? It tends to be a little more inflation protected. If you can build a product or you have a product that you can increase prices on, if it creates genuine value for people. And so making sure you don't just invest all of your time and resources and skills into building things for other people that they control and they own, but make sure you find things that you can own slowly. Again, if you're 23, 24, 25, I don't think that you have to rush for this. As you get older, hopefully you see things and see opportunities that you're like, hey, I think I should build this product or this book. You see a need that genuinely needs to be filled and you start filling it. And I think that's a really big part of this is you need to learn to be empathetic and understand how your customers and clients think and see you, because that's how you build products that people want to buy and build things and scale things. Now, if you're trying to kind of build more of this portfolio career, there's a lot of different opportunities and options that you have in terms of where you can invest your time. So let's talk about a few of those things in terms of what you can do. One, some of the easy things you can do are things like writing content. That's something that, again, does that one-to-many, and it does fit into the instant gratification a little bit because you write a post and it's pretty fast. It's not as valuable as a book in many people's eyes, even if it covers the same things. But it can start building people's awareness of you. It can show off your skills. It helps you build your network. Again, it adds a ton of value. And it's something you can do today, regardless of maybe your skill level. You can just share your thoughts about topics and so on. Another thing you should do is invest your time at work wisely. So again, early on, first year or two, do the tasks that people ask. But as you keep going, start looking for opportunities to really own projects that you think are worth doing. I just had a live with Kathleen, who has a career pedigree that most people would be jealous of, but she did that by constantly putting herself in front of projects and taking on challenges, not that her manager told her to do, but when she saw an opportunity for something, she did it. She gave an example where once someone told her, hey, we'd love it if you could duplicate this process for more people. And she took that as a challenge. She's like, okay, you like this process. I'm going to make a bet on that, a long-term bet at my job. And I'm going to automate this thing that now gets used by 65 teams, I think is what she said in the end. So she built something, she took the time to invest, something that she saw an opportunity in, and she built it, and she was rewarded for that. I will say, if most of the time, if you don't work in big tech, it is sometimes harder to be rewarded for this stuff. That is one of the challenges. Some companies will still do it, but generally speaking, it is not as common. But yeah, if you work in big tech, take those opportunities. If you see something that you could fix and make better, generally you will be rewarded if you can amplify your abilities. Again, it's all about amplifying your abilities. So look for those because, again, those are things you can sell to the next company. Like, hey, I delivered this cool project. I mean, just think about it. In 5 years, if you're doing things on your resume right now that you're not proud of or you don't think will look good to a future employer, you need to find new things to do at work, right? Because again, your portfolio career is not just the projects, the articles, it is the work you're doing right now. So you want to make sure you're taking on projects that can really show off your skill set and drive value at your company. Next, take on the occasional side project, whether it's consulting or just something for fun, do it. Why not, right? Like, why not take the occasional project? It builds your skills. It gives you a more broad view, especially for people who work in FAANGs. Every time they're always surprised at what exists outside of FAANGs and big tech. I talk to them and I have to talk through what tools are. I've actually done this with a few different people where I've talked through, hey, this tool is that tool is this tool. So yeah, take some time, especially if you're in big tech, to go and do some side projects that help other people, because then you'll understand how the rest of the world operates and not just big tech. Maybe you really want to try out YouTube. Put out a few videos on some basic skill you've learned recently or a skill you're really passionate about and show it off. You don't have to show your face. I didn't for a long time in my YouTube videos, so show them off. it's a great way to just learn how to communicate ideas, as well as, again, start building a portfolio that in the future you can be like, hey, manager, not only do I really like this topic, here's some videos you can watch of me talking about it. Honestly, that was something that would have gotten me an interview at Netflix had I taken it. I'd already decided to quit and do consulting, but before I quit, this was like the thing that drove me to quit. And was like, hey, I have opportunities at other companies. A director who was a hiring manager at Netflix reached out to me and was like, hey, would you be interested in working here? Just from my posts and articles. That was really the thing, posts, articles, and videos. They're like, you clearly like this topic. You're clearly passionate about it, and we can teach you the technical stuff. And don't get me wrong, you have to be technically good, but the thing we really want is this, a passion for data and working in data. So showing off that you maybe care about certain topics is great. And videos are hard, both to stand out, but also once you do them, they take far more effort than writing. And so if you can put out videos, most people won't go that far. It's hard, it's difficult, and it's hard to even figure out kind of what people want. If you were to go, I think, on a natural path there, I would say like, hey, write first, see if people kind of connect with that, and then make some videos on what people connect with, and then kind of go from there. But that's more of my approach. Also, you can write for other companies. I actually did that for a long time where I wrote a ton for other companies. I actually worked for a few just content farms, essentially, where I would write articles about tech. It both builds your understanding of what tech's out there and also helps you see what content really works without you having to invest a ton of time writing your own content. But there's a ton more options you can do if you have skills that you can monetize. Obviously, I don't like the idea of monetizing all your skills. Currently, I'm gardening a lot, vegetables mostly, and I'm trying to leave that out of the data world because I want to have the skills that I'm building that have nothing to do with monetization, that just are purely for my joy. But if you have skills that you think you'd like to monetize, again, once you cross that line, it does change your relationship with that skill. But if you want to, do it. Try it out. It's a good opportunity to just build that skill even more, see what people like about it, see what people are willing to pay for. And maybe you decide not to do it, or maybe in the future, it just helps you be better at guiding other people to do that skill better. With that, guys, I really want to hammer home the point that, building a career that you actually enjoy, I think is key, right? One that eventually hopefully gives you the time in the future to enjoy things outside of work. One that lets you use the skills that you actually like using, and one that financially is beneficial to you and isn't just your time, but hopefully at some point is your invested skills and resources and time all together in some sort of equity somewhere, either in a startup or in your own product, because that's really in the long term how I'd see a lot of people going beyond just their day-to-day paycheck. With it, guys, I want to say thanks so much for watching this video. Hopefully it was helpful in understanding that, your career is long. Take some time to occasionally take the risk here or there. With it, guys, I want to say thanks so much, and I will see y'all next time. Thanks all. Bye.